afternoon, 3 o'clock on a gray day where you've been at it all day, I'm not sure. But maybe the carbs have run through your system and maybe you guys can kind of engage with me here. And I'm not sure if the few slides I threw together will work at all, or if we end up just wanting to have a conversation, we can do that as well. So I have to do the usual and customary, what company do our workforce speech? And I think it's a very interesting one for those of you that have lived and worked in the Boston area for quite a while. I've only been here, it'll be 5 years in 3 weeks, because I started the 1st of November 5 years ago, and it seems ages ago. Thermo Fisher Scientific is a very interesting company. We're the world leader in serving science, making the world healthier, cleaner, and safer. However, the interesting thing is we really are a collection of entrepreneurial scientists and engineers. In fact, if you go back through the history of Thermo Fisher Scientific, we are, at last count, over 200 companies that were bought, acquired, merged, integrated, or not, over the past 10 to 50-year period. If you lived here in the late 1990s, early 2000s, you probably knew of Thermo Electron Water, Thermo Electron Micron, Thermo Electron. There were 27 Thermo Electrons. I know this because I inherited 144 ERP systems that grew up through Thermo Electron and Fisher Scientific. And in 2006, the two came together. The $3 billion company bought the $6 billion company and became nearly a 10. Now we're a $12+ billion company. Along the way, no integration was done. Yes, 90 email systems. It was easier for me to email Thornton because I knew he didn't work for my company. I knew where I could find him. He was at olin.edu. I knew I could do that. To email somebody in Thermo Fisher, you had to know what company they came from. So even if they were 4 doors down the hallway, you know, it was Randy Carter at FisherClinicalServices.com. It was Mitch Kennedy at OpenBiosystems.com. It was ridiculous. So we are the world leader in serving science. We have almost 40,000 employees all around the world in 40 different countries, 100 and so different countries where we do business. Okay? So great technology leadership. We are known for that, and I have to tell you, having been in the Boston area now for 5 years, there's amazing stuff that comes out of this area. Amazing. And a lot of it has come in Thermo Fisher Scientific, right? The other thing is we have unparalleled commercial reach. We have thousands of salespeople on the street selling all kinds of things to all kinds of people. We have some interesting websites and mobile applications and incredible personal relationships with scientists and engineers around the globe. And lastly, we are around the globe. Our biggest and fastest growing areas, emerging markets in India, Japan, and China, Brazil, Russia, et cetera, et cetera. So we're kind of everywhere. A little bit about us. We sell consumables, laboratory products and services is about 46%. We have a lot of very interesting analytical instruments. So if you ever watch all those crime shows or go into any lab, anything around food safety or cell biology or biobanking or any of that, you'll find our analytical instruments and technology. And then really interesting, our specialty diagnostics area. So if you're looking for biomarkers or if you're looking for transplant matching, you know, does the new liver going into your body match or not? We do a lot of those very unique specialty diagnostics. So that kind of summarizes who we are. Most of those orders from an IT perspective, this is very interesting. We have some scientists in some of our agreements that if the order is in by 3, you will have that fill in the blank. Serum in the Petri dish at your desk at 8 o'clock in the morning. Or you'll have that chemical mixed and available in your pipettes at 10 o'clock in the morning. We're very, very, if you need it at a certain time, given your experiment, we can fill that need. We also have very custom-made $700,000-$800,000 high-end equipment that will make to stock, make to order. So both of those processes, we can custom make a gas chromatographer or a mass spec, or you can buy one off the shelf. No one buys them off the shelf, they're all custom made, right? But our systems have to support all that. And the reason why I throw these little inputs about systems is that's what drives us having to be so daggone innovative, right? If I was just making security systems, where I came from, Tyco Fire and Security, if I was making those things right there, those little cameras there watching us, or the little water disbursement systems, pretty easy to make. It's very difficult when you're making very different things. Now, Nalgene bottles are different. We can make Nalgene bottles pretty much with our eyes closed. All made in Rochester, New York. We have a lot of innovative leadership across the company. So you guys, if you know these, please tell me, because I'm still trying to figure out the difference between an Exactive and an Orbicat, but they tell me they're different. So there are all these different things that we launch and that we sell to our research scientists, to the food safety scientists, to the water analytics and air analytics people all across the board. We have one division that supports clinical trials, so we are an outsourcer from the pharma companies. So the point I bring here is we're innovative in a lot of different science and engineering areas, all the way from the consumables that you use to the high-end instruments and equipment. Any other questions about Thermo Fisher Scientific? Exit 27 and walk down. All right. So innovative themes, and I want to hit some themes from the CIO's perspective. Number one, if you don't drive innovation into your boring IT strategy and plan, it won't happen. You've got to think innovation is around not only the IT solutions that you're building, but how you do IT. All right, and then how IT is done internally in the company and then externally for our customers. You have to think about what the customer wants or needs, and they can't even tell you. I mean, we all know that. We all, with our iPads and iPhones, did you ever think you could describe that's what you wanted? You could never say that. But we've got to think, what could they possibly want? You mean to say somebody might want a mass spec analyzer and a handheld device for checking drugs on the street? Yeah. Well, guess what? They do. And we're selling them now pretty daggone fast. In fact, we're selling them faster than we can make them right now. Instill a culture of risk-taking, but setting really high aspirations. I was talking with two of my guys, my VP of Apps and VP of Infrastructure today, and we were kind of looking at each other. Did you ever think we'd be where we are now 4 years ago when we started? Because I spent the first half of the year kind of planning, what am I going to do here, learning how to spell Thermo Fisher, etc. Did you ever think we'd be this far? I kept wanting to put that C in Fisher, you know, so that was not a problem. I had to get to T-H-E-R-M-O-F-I-S-H-E-R. Feel like jump rope. Anyway, we were talking about how well and what we've done in that planning, and I'm mad at myself because we were coming from so far behind. Okay, so if I look back at what I've done at Merit and what I've done at Tyco International, we were light years ahead of where I am. So here I am coming to Thermo Fisher, a highly innovative engineering scientist, and I'm like back here in terms of IT. And I didn't set us high enough. In fact, I used to say, and I said this to the board, Jim Manzi sitting across the table, you know, we're not driving to be a world-class organization. Because don't set yourself up for failure, right? Don't say you've got this vision and then not being able to get there. So I wouldn't let us use the world-class terminology for a couple of 2 to 3 years. We probably should have. I mean, we set our goals high, but about a year and a half ago I started saying we're driving to world-class. Because if we don't set to that goal, we won't get below it. Okay, so let's just kind of keep driving to world-class. You've got to set those high aspirations, but you've got to be able to fail. We got a pretty big project right now that about 3 or 4 weeks into it, I already knew we were going down a bad path. And I looked at my VP in charge of it and I said, Kevin, what's going on? He said, I picked the wrong partner. I picked the wrong partner. It's not going to work. I said, then get rid of him. Boom. Overnight, 2 days later, I was in the room saying, you're out. These guys are in. We're starting over. You got to have the guts to do that. And you got to let your team know it's okay to do that. Next point I want to make is it's about breaking down those silos. And as much as innovation is open and flexible and free, you got to have a process. Now, for the men in the room, maybe you'll relate to the story or not. For you gals, maybe you will. I'm a very structured person. In order to be flexible, you got to be structured. I mean, you open my underwear drawer, I got them lined up in a certain way, right? I know which works with which pair of pants, what color goes with what, the structured I am. I can get dressed in the dark in a second because I know where things are. It's the same thing. Even though you're innovating, if you don't have a process, then it's hard to follow. All right, I got to speed up here. Okay, dedicated team members. How many of you have the same guys running your operation and you're expecting them to create something new? Doesn't work. Separate that out. If you haven't read Beachy's book on box 1 and box 3, I'll remember the title in a second. I should have had that on the top of my head. Next, don't expect your scientists and engineers to innovate to project manage. Everybody's got a project manage. So we've got those, head-down project managers that we'll put on projects when we start doing something that's very innovative, so that they're kind of controlled and managed by somebody else, because the scientists aren't going to do it. Safe and secure environment. This is our biggest challenge. Our culture at Thermo Fisher Scientific is that we trust our employees will do the right thing. They're entrepreneurs, they're engineers, they're scientists. They need to have freedom to do, but you got to practice safe innovation. Okay, you can't just be out there wild and crazy in the internet in China. Just don't do that, right? And so how do you as an IT leader make that safe and secure for them? And then lastly, these innovative projects need to have high visibility, good funding, and sponsorship. Okay? It's innovative when you take a company. I know this doesn't sound innovative, but it really was for us. We took a company of, 200 little companies that had grown up, 380 locations, 40,000 employees, and we had about 800 IT people. At one point, I counted up all of the IT vendors that we bought products and services from, 3,000. So for every IT professional, they had 4 unique and distinctive relationships with an IT provider. That's not good. You're losing sourcing savings, you're losing standardization, you're losing all kinds of stuff. My worst bet was we didn't have anyone really providing end-to-end service for our end users. So they didn't have a number to call, they didn't have somebody down the hallway to help them when they couldn't access the internet or their password wasn't working or something like that. So it wasn't innovative. It was like, of course you're going to provide a 24/7 non-language service desk run out of Tampa, Florida and Poznan, Poland. Now people are like, that was one of the more innovative things you ever did. I'm like, really? It's a basic service desk. So let's talk about how you get strategy. How do you think about taking your core platforms, combining different pieces of your technology, and creating new markets for yourself? And this is what we do as a company. This is what we look for. How do we find those areas where we can put something in our analytical technologies together with something in our specialty diagnostics group and create a whole new market, right? And so we do that. Our strategy for the company plans in that innovation to help drive growth. We expect a certain amount of new products and services every year. Those new products and services really have to be customer focused. As we said, sometimes the customers don't really know what they want. The sheriffs driving around in police cars never really knew they wanted a hairdryer looking device that could zap a piece, of powder and say, yep, that's cocaine, nope, that's baby powder. They didn't know they wanted that. They didn't know that they wanted to pay for it on a transaction basis, and they don't even have to buy the device. They just pay for it. And all that goes up to the cloud and comes back down and tells them what it is or not. It's cut their time to keep their prisoners in their jails from 9 to 10 days to 15 minutes if they even take them in, right? Because when they used to have to send that powder off to be tested, it was 9 or 10 days before it would come back for validation. Those were our tax dollars hard at work keeping those guys in jails waiting for the results, right? So they never knew that. So how do you develop those types of things that the customers are looking for? In our IT strategy, this is a page right out of our strap delivered June 18th and to the board in July 12th. We talk about we're growing through innovation. It's a pretty boring strategy. It talks about really making us look like to our customers as one when we really have grown up through all these different companies. And it talks about constantly driving cost out of IT. The more I can drive out of just running basic IT, the more I can put in innovative solutions. And we have our metrics that we measure who and what we are through the next 5 years of our strat period. Whoops, went too fast. We also go back and look at every strategy to win. That's on the left-hand side of the page here. I'm not going through each one of them. But when I define my strategy, I'm looking for something on the right-hand page, what I'm going to do to drive that strategy on the left-hand page. So if I'm not aligning the innovative moves of where the company's going with an IT solution or product or service, how can I help drive innovation? We did take one more step and said, okay, we're doing basic IT, basic shared services, basic ERP consolidation, basic data warehousing, but how do we look at that and say, if we did some things differently, we would really change? If we really looked at supply chain differently than we've ever looked at before, how could we really improve it to our customers? If we really looked at IP addressing everything and pulling in diagnostic information and information through our experiments on our different instruments, we could actually change the model of how Quest and LabCorp do some of their drug testing, right? So if you really think about what you can do differently with your pieces of equipment through the workflow, quote unquote, you can really change. In terms of content, how do you really manage? Now, we're a little behind. You can keep going down the Beltway and go to PTC and see some pretty incredible things that many companies have done with their John Deere tractor or their Boeing, planes or whatever. But from the scientific perspective, if you start thinking of engineering drawings of scientific equipment and scientific processes, you can start thinking of some very innovative ways to shorten the scientific process. And then the lab of the future, how do you really change the way we do science, and how do the scientists change? I think we're all recognizing the scientists coming out and that have grown up on the internet and have grown up in Google and grown up doing things differently are going to do science very differently than, our typical 50-year-old PhDs down the street in Cambridge and sitting in their little labs and reading books. Love them dearly. They are big buyers of our equipment, but they're probably going to think differently going forward. So we've got some innovative ideas in working with the equipment and instruments that we make. Many of our cooling devices now are refrigerators and freezers. They have more scientific words, but I call them refrigerators and freezers. They all now have an iPad on the front of them, and they're all IP addressed, right? So we can monitor what's happening in them from wherever. From wherever. I mean, do you really need to go say, oh, that's cold? And you can't open it. There's stuff in there. They can't. So how do you know it's really working? So we've got some things that are coming together there. So when we think about innovation and we think about process, people, and resources, so we do have a series of processes that we follow in terms of innovation. Defining what the projects are, defining the long-term growth of where this new idea is going to take it. How does that really play into our annual operating plan? How does that play into what money you get? What's that process to support it? In terms of people, whether or not it's the scientist or the financial manager or the project manager or the councils that are kind of vetting out these ideas saying, well, that's not going to work or that's going to work. We have different types of organizations and different reviews through that process that the people make to make sure. And then from a resources perspective, how much money do you give them when? When do you pull their money because they're failing fast and not admitting it? And what tools do you have in your toolbox in terms of software, hardware, techniques, whatever, so they're not always reinventing the wheel? When we came from all the different companies, I think we probably have about 30 different modules of software that calculate date and time. Really? So we've tried to work around that and build a bank of solutions. We have our own app store now internal to our own SharePoint environment where we're sharing our own mobile apps that we develop internal to the company that we don't even release to the world, right? Their own. And that's really helping, right? Because now we're sharing a lot more. We also look at defining that breakthrough innovation. And these little dots, I took off their codes. It was over on that right-hand side of the page. It's now blank. We have things that are in that core area. We use them today. We serve, our market easily. They're good. We can find ways to decrease the cost in these product lines, bread and butter. You got to keep it going. Then how do you define that next box out, the adjacency and the sweet spot of how you can really grow that, but how are you really thinking of new, large, high-risk areas to address and to put teams together to address those. So we kind of plot through. I've got right now on my IT list of projects for next year. I hate the annual operating process. I wish we'd found a way just to make it rolling. You know, it's just crazy. So we've got, I think the last time I counted, about 100 projects to do. Now I know only about 4 of those will really drive a needle-moving set of results. The rest of them are kind of going to move it some, and then half of them you just got to do, right? You got to upgrade this. You got to expand your storage that. But how do you really weigh those risky projects? I was sitting with my finance partner last week, and he said, should we do that ERP enhancement in India, or should we put in the new manufacturing system in Marietta, Georgia? Not Marietta, Georgia, Marietta, Ohio. I'm like, a factory in Marietta and growth in India. I don't know. I mean, let's look at what value we're going to get from that. Where is it going to come from? Who's going to do the work? And can the Indian guys really manage a new solution when you've just replaced all 5 of the business leaders? We're going to Marietta. Right? So you really got to look at the capability, capacity, when you're defining what are those big alternatives out there. I'm sure you guys all have a similar type of boxing and drawing pictures and defining value and priority. I'm sure you all have different ways of doing ideation and how you create ideas. I love that, you know, I have to look at it to say it, the ethnography? Ethnography, there you go. I grew up in the South, we didn't say such big words. Have you ever seen that picture of the typical Android user? Isn't that cool? Where did we see that? I've tried to find it again and I can't find it.
I saw it on the web somewhere.
It is so cool. It's like this, yeah, it's like this picture of a guy, and you know, 33% of them wear jeans and 66% wear khakis. You know, so they have the picture of them, and all of that is scientifically generated through, you know, through big data coming in. It's very cool. I need to go back and find it. But how do you come up with the ideas? And we have brainstorming sessions where we'll get R&D guys together with the marketing guys and the guys, you know, feet on the street that are out there saying, what do our customers really want? So we can define what many of these next initiatives are. I love it when all of my business guys come in and tell me all the great things we should do in IT. I love those. A lot of them are just, yeah, that's not going to work. Okay, so let's talk security. We all love to think we can just be free and easy and do whatever we want to out there until we get Senator Rockefeller's letter. Are any of y'all dealing with Senator Rockefeller's letter? Does anybody know about Senator Rockefeller's letter? Okay, this is a good test.
Is there a Senator Rockefeller?
Yes, John D. Rockefeller, Senator John D. Rockefeller.
West Virginia, right?
He proposed a bill similar to the Sarbanes-Oxley bill that Fortune 500 companies or some big companies, maybe Fortune 1000, would have to, on an annual basis, go through a question process, kind of like the payment card industry, the PCI questionnaire process, and through an audit process to prove that we had good cybersecurity. So the Sarbanes-Oxley bill of financial reporting, it was the Rockefeller bill of cybersecurity. Well, it did not pass. In fact, it got canned pretty quickly through Congress, and he got mad. So he's written a letter to the CEOs of the Fortune 500 companies asking them like 6 or 7 questions about what do we do to practice safe IT. So, and we all have to answer back by October 19th. So it's very interesting because every CIO that I've talked to, they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, I'm not making this up. I've got it right here. My lawyer partner's got it right here. And, you know, we're trying to decide because, you know, as soon as you answer it, it's out there in the public domain. It's out there in the public domain. Every hacker's coming after you. So how much are you going to answer this question, right? I have cybersecurity. Yes.
Well, why do you have to answer it?
Well, you're going to tell the Congress that you, as a Fortune 500 company, aren't going to answer it? Really? What are you trying to hide?
No, I'm not in a position to answer or not answer. I'm just curious if you're hearing from other Fortune 500 CIOs that they're not answering.
I'm hearing from other CIOs. They're like, I don't know what you're talking about.
That's
so I would imagine they're running back.
Yeah. So you could also say, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they can show you got it. Anyway, So practicing safe, security, we do have executive oversight. I do go to the board twice a year to talk about what we're doing in risk management and IT security. We do have a risk management IT security committee. I do have, well, he's not really a chief information security officer because I have to pay him a lot more money than I'm willing to pay him, but I have a very, very fabulous guy that runs my IT security. And we do, audit partners, and we have third-party reviewers, and so we do a lot ourselves to kind of make sure that we have good security. We have our policies and procedures. Nothing protects you better than a policy, right? I never did that. So we have global policies, we have local and regional procedures in place. I do peer-to-peer reviews. I'll send the IT leader of this division over to that division to check things. We do awareness training and communication constantly. It never stops. The engineer from someplace in the United States who took his laptop with 25 gig worth of stuff and, just thought he'd use a hotspot at a coffee shop in China. It was so fast. It was amazing how fast when he came back and connected into the network. It was amazing. He just watched it go out. Okay, so we also have tools and teams we've put in place. Thank God we had the monitoring and alerting software. It was amazing to watch that monitoring and alerting software when it saw what was happening, how it shut everything down so fast. Now we're convinced a lot went out, but it shut it down really, really quickly. So we've put all those things in place so we feel like we're practicing safe innovation, but it's always a challenge. There's always something new. Have you guys been killed with the photo spam? God, am I the only one? Do y'all really, seriously, you haven't been getting this email called photos? All right. That's another one that's nearly killed us.
Can you describe that a little bit more? Yeah, is it just high resolution stuff that steals bandwidth, or what's it do?
It comes from anybody because what it does is it comes in from some name that you may recognize partially, and it says, here are your photos, or hi, I've got your photos for it. Somewhere photos is in the subject line. Some very smart people that work for you in your company will open that and will go to the link and click on it. Not good. So then, of course, they Trojan and take every distribution list you have, and then they send it to everybody else.
Right.
And we've had about 6 waves of this. And you can't block it because it's not coming from the same domain. And you can't block it because it's coming from photos, because your scientists get really mad when they're trying to send their photos of their new equipment around. So it's just been really hard to control that. Yeah. So our software's trying to catch it.
Work or your private?
Well, I don't remember. I got the email. I don't remember if it was my work or my project.
And you deleted it.
There's social engineering going on because you've got all these thought leaders who are actually speaking at conferences. And so they reach out to the, and you can pretty much get their email, and they say, oh, doctor, soon to win the Nobel Prize, or okay, you took these pictures of you while you were speaking, right? Boom, bam.
Right.
Yeah, you cannot go there.
Right.
Okay, so we have that type of stuff in place. And then from a sponsorship perspective, we do have our process we follow to kind of create more and more things coming through the funnel. We require and ask the local guys to sponsor. They got to test it first. They got to really challenge. Now, we also know sometimes the local guys will kill it too fast because they don't have enough funding to really start it. And then when that happens, we say, let's let the council kind of make sure that we don't lose those homegrown ideas that don't make it through the local. And then our group and division leadership really shepherd it through. We have an organic growth board that really drive where are we going with it. And our executive sponsors take it over. So we do have a process, and we raise up the level of sponsorship as things are going through. Even our IT initiatives, we take through the same process, right? So a couple of things just in closing, and then we can chat and talk about how innovative we really think we are. Your strategy's got to address the innovation. Processes, people, resources to support the innovation, right? really having security around what you're innovating, because the idea is just go. There are a lot of high-tech companies now that are actually thinking about stepping back from being in China, because China's just requiring too much intellectual property left there for taken. And then lastly, without that sponsorship, you can't innovate. You really can't get the money or the projects or the people or the funding or anything to do something like that. So I will stop at that, 35 minutes in, and say, what do I want to talk about?
Is there actually someone who carries the title Chief Innovation Officer in your organization?
Not really. We have chief scientists and chief technology officers that are scientists and engineers in our divisions and in our groups. We have a very important award we do every year, the George Histopoulos Award. He was the founder of Thermo Electron years and years ago for the most innovative product each year. So we have a lot of recognitions and rewards to drive innovation. And we have our councils and our review boards. All of our divisions have a version of a common new product development process, but we do not have one chief. We do have, there's always those guys that just kind of carry the respect of that role, even though it's not a role. Like anytime new comes up, if Ian doesn't have a blessing on it, then people don't talk about it.
If you had a one role, do you think it would be effective the way you're structured?
Not in Thermo Fisher Scientific. No, we are a very complex, very fragmented organization, and we pride ourselves to be that way because that allows us to really grow and expand and be the entrepreneurial and innovative company we want to be.
So the champion or sponsor model is what we're supposed to.
If you had one, that's just, the guy would never sleep. It's too much going on.
Well, on the former slide, which showed kind of all the levers that you have for innovation, you kind of mentioned earlier as well. Is that all centrally managed, or is that at the divisional level? So those are all just things
It
that
starts
happen.
at the local,
Yeah.
and then comes up through division and group, and yes.
Okay.
Local business unit, division group.
Right,
think about it that
right.
way. We report financially to Wall Street in segments, but we're organized in groups and divisions, business units and local. It's a weird dynamic, so if you draw, a horizontal and vertical axis, we operate in a very division-directed, factory-focused model. That's how we operate. Our customers see us, and we need to work in a very customer-centric, business process-based model. So how we need to be seen and how we need to be efficient is different than how we're organized at work.
Gotcha.
So that's always challenging.
Are you just trying to? Are you by product groups or by sectors that you serve, like healthcare?
Yes.
Both.
Yes. Yeah. It's very complicated.
Yeah.
Well, and for example, how did like Cardinal Health had the problem was they also did a lot of acquisitions, right? And it was interesting. Their CMO actually went to like their key customers, the hospitals, wherever they're buying their stuff, and they had 25 cards of different salespeople calling on them. Type of thing. How do you know? Do you have a common customer registry type of thing? So there's really one person is responsible for like when you guys sell something to Mass General or somebody who probably consumes a whole lot of your stuff.
So our biggest number of cards from Thermo Fisher to one customer was 42. So we have cards.
So you had that, right?
Same but
So
bigger.
for our major, top 20 customers, we do have an account management structure. We do, and we're expanding more of that. We have a very feet on the street relationship with many of our customers. So we have very strong account management, a very strong relationship in terms of sector and segment that they're in, location that they are. And then as you go down the 350,000 customers that you have, and no, we do not have one customer file, have one customer cross-reference file, but no. We do a lot through inside sales. We have a huge channel operation. We do $1 billion worth of sales every year just through our internet site, here in the U.S. only. Globally, it's more than that. So Yeah, my answer to any either or question typically is yes. Yes.
You mentioned BJ, girl from Derrida.
See, you can't say it either, but you know who I'm talking about, BJ.
Is it the other side of innovation?
Yes.
Okay. Is that a process that your whole company uses, or that you?
Both. In fact, I sponsored BG to speak at our senior leadership session that we had last year over at Babson. And we spoke about box 1, box 2, box 3. And using that strategy, we kind of defined our focus for R&D for this next 5-year period. So yes, and we do that more and more and more. I try very hard. I mean, a failed IT project is one you give to the people who are trying to keep the lights on. You just don't do that. So we already, for any major business transformation initiative or business reengineering or an organizational change, like when we bought a company, Dionix, that was gas chromatography. We wanted to merge that right into our mass spec division, right? So we took mass spec and gas chrome and put them together. And that was a complete blend. That project was a very big project because you were moving, 20 different offices, combining offices and combining structures, and a little bit of IT support, right? So that was we separate those people out of their day job and put them over here to drive that integration. Yep.
So your company, R&D must be obviously extremely important. I found it really interesting when you were talking about protecting IP and users going to China using hotspots, whatever. And also, it seems like there's this trend that collaboration often is a catalyst for new ideas and innovation, right? But collaboration inherently means you have to be a little bit more open than you were used to. So do you find a hard time balancing kind of opening things up a little bit more and yet protecting your IP, and how have you navigated it?
Yeah, so that you have to think about that on two sides. So first, there's from a technology perspective, giving them a safe place to be open, right? So through our SharePoint-based solution, we have different team sites and team rooms. Some of them are very public in the company, and some of them are by invitation only, right? So those are pretty strict. Now, any hacker can figure out how to hack all in that, but at least internally we feel like we're doing the right thing. We are opening many external SharePoint-based sites to our select customer sets. So we'll have one, we have Bayer and Merck and Pfizer and others where we're sharing collectively with our customer scientists and our scientists, and kind of think of that as a private chat room. But we have tons of documents because we do a lot of work with them and whatever. So those are again in a SharePoint-based. That's a cloud-based solution that we have. So we're open with that. So what's interesting is we can put social media tools in place, whether it's just basic SharePoint and People Finder, or dropping in a Gamma solution for a while. We've dropped in things to see the take-up period, and we'll see the surge, and then you just watch it kind of fade like this. And you're like, well, why aren't, what's wrong here, right? And some of it is, did the people have that about them? Is our culture such that that's what they do? So you're constantly having to encourage them and show where things have happened faster, quicker, better, cheaper because they used different tools. There's nothing better than when everybody gets together and have we'll do that on a couple of times a year. We'll have an R&D symposium where we bring people together. And even then, they've all got their laptops open. They're all sharing through SharePoint, but they've got that face-to-face. We also sponsor several symposiums with our IT partners. Because if you think about it, if you start IP and enabling everything, I don't think we're going to IP enable a pipette, but certainly a lot of our instruments and equipment, centrifuges, refrigerators, etc. So we sponsor a bunch of symposiums. We have one coming up in a couple of weeks with Microsoft, and another one with Apple, and another one with IBM. So we sponsor co-partner things with our scientists and us to kind of come up with new ideas and think about things.
Do you incorporate any sort of metrics around innovation to show proportionately?
The Vitality Index.
Okay.
It's one of our key metrics we use to manage our business. So any product that's released has a Vitality Index, which is how much revenue it generates over how fast of a period and how fast is it starting to fall off. Because if it launches too hard, too fast, and quick sales and starts falling, you better have something in the back. So you're looking for that vitality index. And there are, I won't share with you, but there's all kinds of, the speed with which the vitality index goes up, we measure the speed, how long it stays, how long, and then when it starts coming down. So all of that changes of the vitality index we measure.
And that's plugged right into your process.
It's in our quarterly business review.
Okay.
So we look at revenue, operating margin, free cash flow, vitality index, HR turnover, IT system utilization. We look at all kinds of things like that.
So with regards to the vitality index of key products, is there a direct linkage to IP?
No, not yet.
What are some big data issues or challenges you're facing?
You know, we really haven't broken that tip. We haven't
Yeah.
started there yet. We're beginning. We're watching things right now. You know, we watch for things in the social world, comments about, I couldn't get this, or where's the spare part for that, or, you know, something like that. Because you have to remember, some of this equipment has been out there for 10 or 15 years, and it still works very well, right? And they don't remember the Joe Bag of Donuts that sold them that refrigerator 15 years ago, and they need a spare part. Well, how do they find that, right? So we've got this unbelievable system that we built that connects, it's called Connects. It connects any make, model, serial number of anything we ever built any time in the past X number of years to who takes care of it now.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Sounds
it just-
cool. Sure.
It sounds cool.
Easy to manage, yeah.
Yeah, we use the Endeca search engine to do that. So, you know, you think it's just a relational database that you put in a serial number and it magically, no. It's this whole search and find through all of our systems who owns that now. Yep.
I have a couple basic questions. First of all, you said 40,000 employees. How big is your IT department?
Well, I rounded to 40,000. It's really 39 something or
Okay.
other.
And how big is your IT department? And when you do acquisitions, is there sort of automatically the IT people report to you, or how does that, or does it depend?
So our IT staff, we have about 900 employees. And then I've got about a 10% swing up or down that happens with either new projects underway or acquisition underway or something. And when we do an acquisition, on day one, I want their email and their SharePoint access turned on. So they're an employee of the company, and they need to act and feel like they're Joe Bag of Donuts at thermofisher.com. Right? And day 30, they've got to be in the network, and day 90, they got to move their servers into the data center, and we have a whole integration path for that. And as we do an acquisition, depending upon where they are and what they've got in terms of IT skills, if they stay with the company, which most people do, they're an IT person. But all of us at Thermo Fisher, we all have two bosses, right? So they're in IT under me, but they report to their business unit, or they're in shared services. And they report to me in shared services.
So just two more quick questions. One, you mentioned your CISO. How long has he or she been with you?
Tom's been with me, I'll say 3 years. He was my first major mandatory hire, had to do it no matter what, because we didn't have anything. I mean, it's really scary. I walked in the door 5 years ago and I said, you know, so where are we in PCI? And they had no idea what PCI was.
And then finally, let me see if I can, I noticed that you had a strategy, 2012 to whatever, 5 years. Was that coordinated with a company strategy, and what did your IT strategy look like before that? I'm just thinking of the fact that you've been there a little over 5 years, and you have this brand new IT strategy.
Yeah, sure. So Thermo Electron, prior to my coming in 2007, Thermo Electron had an IT leader for 14 months. Josita Dodd was her name, and she took the company through the SOX filing. And she was their IT leader for 14 months. Fisher Scientific, Ramon Baez, who's now CIO at HP, he was over at Kimberly-Clark. He was with Fisher Scientific for about 16 months. His wife hated New England. He wasn't so sure about it. When Thermo Electron bought Fisher they just didn't really talk to Ramon very much, and he felt very unloved. And so Kimberly Clark came and took him away. So when I came in the door, I looked at the two organizations, now Thermo Fisher Scientific, and said, you've had an IT leader for 30 consecutive months over the past 5 years, or 30 total months over the past 5 years. So like, where's your IT strategy and plan? There was nothing, nothing. So our first strategic plan we wrote in the summer of 2008 that the board endorsed. And so that was what we refer to now as Chapter 1. And that was 2008 through 2012. And that was all about laying the foundation, driving the building of the shared services for infrastructure and applications, and laying the framework and moving from 180 ERPs down to a core 8. We're still got a bunch more cats and dogs, but by the time we finish next year, 2013, we'll have about 80% of our revenue will come through 2 core ERPs, and another 10% through another 6. So 90% of our revenue will be through our 8 core ERPs. We'll never be one. Never, 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 never. Never, because we're too different across the company. So we're in our second chapter of our strategy. Any other questions? This side of the room's been kind of quiet. I hope it's because I haven't had my back to it.
I asked one.
No, they've been slow all day. It's like,
It's that side of the room that's slow all day.
I mean, you can't do anything with them, I'm telling you. Pump them with caffeine, give them sugar, they're nothing.
Well, that makes you feel good, huh? So I'll tell a funny story. A couple of, let's say 2 years ago, I had dinner with not Jim, but the other CEO of BlackBerry. And I left that meeting and I said, I got to change where we're going. This is not feeling good. And I came back and I started talking about we needed to open up at least our mobile devices to have some freedom. And started talking about, bring your own device, which I've used too many big words for my executives, and they were really very freaky about allowing an iPhone. And then we did an acquisition, and they were California, and of course all they did were iPhones, right? So I said, I'm not going to make them give that up to go to a BlackBerry, and it's like, this is crazy. And it took us a while, I won't tell you how long, to get our executive team to buy into the fact we need to let in an iPhone. Right? We're still not there on Androids, and I'm not ready because I just don't think that they're completely safe as the way they ought to be. And so now by the end of this year, we'll have 2,000 tablets in the hand of our sales and service team. And we're not bleeding edge. Thermo Fisher Scientific is not a bleeding edge company. We're not even a leading edge. I mean, we wait until we know that technology is going to work and we know it's going to bring value, and then we are careful and cautious. But then when we commit, we go. And it's interesting now to see what's happening.
So it's a fascinating, innovative culture that you're on top of, type of thing. So I understand, right? Culturally, I mean, if you label yourself as well, we innovate here too. I'm just wondering, the relationship between IT and the people and the innovators who actually create new products. How does that work? Because I'm imagining that a lot of those products have IT support as part of them.
It's not the way I want it to be. We're always kind of after the fact. Where are you? What are you doing? How can we help you? Okay. We're not collectively out there in front, right? And that comes from the culture of IT, and the respect level of IT has always been rather low in Thermo Fisher. It's changed a lot in the past 5 years, but it's still, IT was never seen as the innovation leader. That's changing some.
But you're going to be almost like a facilitator or a leader, because you're saying that your strategy is not to be leading or bleeding edge in the IT itself, but rather to support the company to be leading and bleeding edge in the technology they offer to the marketplace.
My job as Chief Innovation Officer is to make it is to enable it and encourage it and challenge, you know. I mean, I spend some of my time out with people like you and at different conferences and coming back with ideas and thoughts, and I just ask a lot of hard questions to people, and then that gives them ideas, makes them think. Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the fact that you guys are on the leading edge area, do you think that's more of a function of your business or your organizational structure, having gone through some acquisitions and things being very sort of disparate?
Yeah, our structure is always a strength and a weakness for us, because we are so complex and fragmented. We can weather many economic storms because of it, but it is pretty hard. That's why you're never going to do one ERP. In fact, I have one service desk. It's pretty amazing. And it didn't happen overnight. It took us some time to get there. You can't know everything that's going on. You just got to kind of set it up so that it goes. Okay?
Just amazing. Thank you very much for sharing.